According to Article 253 of the Constitution of the Maldives, in an event of a threat to national security, the President may declare a state of emergency in all or part of the country for a period not exceeding 30 days. On February 5, 2018, President Abdullah Yamin Abdul Qayyum declared a state of emergency in the Maldives.
Not all, but some of the judges there decide that they can overturn without any evidence, without any appeal on the part of anybody, sentences of serious charges and serious sentences against very senior officials, and it was also a selective job, as you know, and certain people in a particular case would have been highlighted and others were not on the list of people who, I think it was a list of 9 people, but if you look at the particular cases, there were others who were involved in the same cases as well. For example, the case that Nasheed faced, there was the former defense minister as well who continues to serve sentence, but his name wasn't on the list. It's the same with Adib and others. So we know that the motive was very different.
On February 1st, 2018, the Supreme Court issued an order that was highly politically charged. The order had 3 effects. First, the Supreme Court appropriated the powers of the judicial oversight body, the Judicial Service Commission, the JSC. Second, it ordered the release of 9 high-profile individuals. And third, it reinstated 12 opposition members of parliament who the Elections Commission disqualified based on a Supreme Court ruling.
People behind the judicial coup or the attempted judicial coup are very powerful people. There were ex-presidents, there were ex-vice presidents and ministers. We know now that if they had the chance, they would have easily toppled the government because they have very good access and influence to the state authorities and also to the people while they were in power. But the masterminds, if you speak of it, masterminds of these 2 ex-presidents, Nasheed and Maumoon, and they were helped by 2 tycoons or also politicians, Vice President Adib and Qasim Ibrahim.
It is now clear that Chief Justice Abdullah Saeed and Justice Ali Hamid were bribed to set into motion a process that would have toppled the government. From the very onset, it was clear that a handful of people conspired to overthrow a lawfully elected government just months shy of a presidential election.
It is very simple and it is very logical when you look at the 1st of February order that was released by the Supreme Court, because the people involved, the 9 people involved were ordered to release from prison were people of the high importance or leads to believe that they were the conspirators. For example, previous President Nasheed, who himself is convicted of criminal charges by abducting a judge. After abducting the judge, he openly confessed to this on open media, including international media. And he is a fugitive running from the government or from the sentences. Next is, for example, Adib, who was the vice president, who has taken a lot of fund from the public. Ill-found money has made him one of the richest people in this country, and the co-conspirator is his uncle. Also, people like Colonel Nazim, who conspired to overthrow a government. He was found guilty of having firearms in his residence. And also people like Sheikh Imran, who was the leader of the religious party, who incited violence through religious speech. People like Qasim, who owes the public tax money that he has not paid, over 160 million. And also recently who has accepted while he was talking to a public TV that he actually did influence the Supreme Court decision on the 1st of February. And also people like Faris, ex-president and the dictator's son, who was openly bribing. Now he is darling of the opposition. And also I might add that the other 2 persons who were former PG and the magistrate, who both faked documents and tried to topple the government, arrest the president using fake documents. So these were the kind of people. And one would have to think why these 9 people, while on the same charges, There are people who has been arrested and convicted. Only certain names have come up in this order, and they were at certain stages of a legal system. Some of them have been already given 3 hearings of the legal system. Some of them are awaiting their sentences. Some of them, their cases were just being heard at the High Court level. So this shows that these 9 people, specifically chosen 9 people, and their connection shows very clearly that these were the people who was conspiring judicial-led coup in the Maldives.
The government described this as judicial overreach. Never in the judicial history of Maldives has the Supreme Court made themselves immune to oversight via an order issued by its own bench. The court also carried out worrisome actions such as attempting to halt ongoing police investigations and reinstate a dismissed police commissioner. The court also blocked all lines of communication with the executive. Many of the Supreme Court's actions at that point were outside of its jurisdiction.
After one day, they gave the audience and then was asked to put the cases to Supreme Court to discuss. So we thought that the Supreme Court justices would give that opportunity to the government or to the state, but then they cut down the power or the internet, so that we couldn't even submit the cases over the internet. So these were the ill doings or things that was very irrational by the Supreme Court justices. After that, when they realized that this was unconstitutional and people come to know all this, that there is unconstitutional elements in their order, what they tried to do was try to impeach the president. In the constitution of the Maldives, a president cannot be impeached by the Supreme Court. It has to be done by the parliament. But then we had evidence that it was discussed in the chambers, but the 3 Supreme Court judges that were not bribed did not allow that to happen. And on top of that, they tried to also impeach the Attorney General.
Despite the shocking irregularities of the Supreme Court order of February 1st, the administration handled the situation with caution and patience. The executive opted for patience and prudence in handling what is now described as a constitutional crisis. The state was not ready to respond to the situation. The country's nascent constitution was put under such undue, unforeseen pressure as to bring the state to a standstill. A nation washed with unease as what seemed to be a simple order by the apex court was slowly but steadily exposed as an attempt to overthrow a lawfully elected government.
Nobody denied their rulings. We have multi-billion-dollar projects going on in this country. We have a tourist population in this country. We have our kids going to school as normal. Hospitals are functioning as normal. A massive, investment regime in progress, as I said. Just imagine one single day, one fine day, you wake up in the morning and then see Supreme Court has overturned all the independent institutions and brought them to a halt. It's quite natural. The head of the state ask the Supreme Court how these procedures can be carried out.
Questionable circumstances of the order led the Maldives Police Service to unearth evidence that implicated both Supreme Court justices, which in turn led to the Chief Justice rushing to halt the investigation.
Maldives Police Service has uncovered evidence that implicates Chief Justice Ustaz Abdul Saeed and Justice Ustaz Ali Hamid in a conspiracy of judicial corruption and attempting to unlawfully overthrow the government. The police found 215,000 US dollars and 150,000 Maldivian rupiah in a bag belonging to Justice Ali Hamid, and also discovered that a prominent Maldivian business has loaned US dollar 2.4 million to the family of Justice Ali Hamid. Based on the evidence, Chief Justice Abdul Saeed and Justice Ali Hamid have been arrested and charged with accepting bribes and delivering verdicts in a special interest, using the influence of the office to attempt the overthrow of a legal constitutional administration, and attempting to influence the administration and willful and unlawful interference of the criminal justice system. There is further documentary evidence that confirms suspects in this case have purchased expensive overseas properties that are not within the means of a justice. Critical evidence and information crucial to the investigation has also been recovered from a black suitcase which was confiscated from the residence of Najma Ibrahim. She is an employee at office of the former President Mohamed Abdul Gayoom. Based on the evidence, former President Mohamed Abdul Gayoom has been arrested and charged with bribing members of parliament and attempting to overthrow a legitimate government, influencing judges by offering them money as bribes to ensure desired verdicts, and attempting to influence the security forces and planning and inciting them to work against the government. The police have also obtained documentary evidence from the recently found suitcase that Ahmad Faris Maumoon attempted to influence the judiciary. The investigations are going at this time.
The government cites evidence discovered as proof of a vast conspiracy set in motion by key figures of the opposition. The government argues that with the judiciary hijacked, the constitution fundamentally compromised, and an imminent threat to national security, the president was left with no option but to declare a state of emergency.
Now, the government has been very clear about this. The powers gained under the state of emergency is only being used for those who are directly under investigation by the police. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that the Chief Justice and Justice Hamid were institutions unto themselves, such drastic steps would not have been necessary. If it wasn't for the fact that these are Supreme Court justices, we would not have had to take such drastic action. Now, if they hadn't disabled the Judicial Services Commission, if they hadn't crippled the police investigation, there might have been another way to resolve the situation. We wouldn't be in a state of constitutional crisis. The reality is that the state of emergency was the only way to ensure that we would have a credible and independent investigation. Now, the reality also is that no one else has been affected. There's been no one affected outside of the capital. There's been none of our leisure facilities that have been affected. They're all open. Businesses, schools, beaches are all open.
What is clear now is that the situation was handled with due caution and prudence. In the midst of an attempted coup, the president showed confidence and resolve in his duties as he addressed his supporters and the public, reassuring a troubled nation. He did not abandon ship. Embracing his constitutional duty to protect and preserve the rule of law, and steered the nation back to the path of certainty.
If it wasn't for the prudence and tenacity shown by our president to uphold the constitution, we would be in utter chaos today. His strategic thinking definitely saved our nation. Imagine if this judicial coup was successful. You have the president and the vice president unlawfully removed, the constitution in tatters, dangerous criminal controlling the reign of power. Who would stand by and watch this happen? The president's supporters would not stand idly by. Neither me or neither the joint parliamentary group members would remain silent. Even the majority of the opposition, especially the youths of this country, would not stand by as the constitution is undermined. There is not a single island in the nation that the President Yamin's development agenda has not touched. Most Maldivians, even in the opposition, recognize this fact very clearly. President Yamin is indeed a great believer in transforming and enabling people through development. He also stands firm in his duty to protect the constitution and the rule of law. He is indeed the president of the youth. He is indeed the president of the future.
The road to recovery continues, punctuated with developments that continue to expose the true magnitude of the coup attempt. One opposition leader on live TV has admitted to being involved in the delivery of the Supreme Court verdict of February 1st. The only party in duress are those involved as the failed coup unravels before the nation's eyes. The true nature of these political figures who have been idolized by their supporters are being exposed. The administration stands firm, however, in the belief that justice and rule of law will prevail.